All right. Welcome back, everybody. This is Copper State Fireman Podcast. I have the privilege to sit down here with Battalion Chief Chris Slayer. He has 26 years in the American Fire Service, has 17 years as a suppression captain. He has been a lead instructor with Fire by Trade and has taught numerous fire conferences. He's collaborated with David Rose in fire engineering for the Book of Andy. More importantly, he is about 9 months away from retirement, and that's probably the most important thing about his career right now. So anyway, welcome. Thank you for your time. Thanks for coming out, Chief. And really why I wanted to get you on this show is we want to talk about the fools. But before I do that, is there anything that you want the audience to know about you before we get going?
Man, other than like you said, I've got about 26 years on the job. It'll be 27 when I retire. I started on my birthday in 1999, January 11th, 1999, and I'm going to end January 11th, 2026.
All right.
So that'll be my last shift. So I've got two beautiful girls. Mackenzie's 20 and a junior at Grand Canyon studying psychology. So she's smarter than her dad as long as she doesn't try to get in my head. And then I got a 13-year-old, Blakely. She might pop her head in. Usually she does here. So, but she's my little pride and joy. She's into everything. Loves to public speak, which is super cool. I don't know how she or where she even gets that. And then I got two bonus kids from the relationship I'm in right now. Jenna is 19 and she's studying nursing, and Chase he's older, 24. So that's my family life. My girlfriend Joanna, we've been together for a little while, and it's been awesome, man. Life is good, no complaints.
Yeah, it sounds like you're living your best life right now. So
That is a fact right now.
perfect. Well deserved. So, and that's kind of what I'm hoping we're going to get into today. So, this podcast exists because of Copper State Fireman Copper State Firemen Fools. And with that said, our claim to fame is we're the first chapter in the state, and that's a total lie. Because as we find out later, so you had actually started a Fools chapter. So let's just pivot off of there. What year was it? Why'd you start the chapter? What was the name? And kind of what was the progression of your Fools chapter while you guys were active?
So I was actually the second. There was another Mesa dude that started it years ago. His name was, we call him Root, but his name was Rick Shaw. It was kind of short lived, but that was the first chapter. Man, I probably started mine in 16, right around that year. And I called it the Departed Ones because Hohokam and Mesa, that's where I work, the city of Mesa, is translation is the Departed Ones. So I used it for that Fools. The website's still up and everything. Then I got involved with Fire Nuggets right around the same time. So I used the 501c3 umbrella of the Fire Nuggets to do most of our Fools meetings. I called it Tactics on Tap. I don't know if you're a member of that on Facebook. So that, and we started Fire Training Toolbox, which was probably one of the largest, training things the fire service had, which is cool. Fire Nuggets is giant now. We host probably 100 classes a year and several major conferences. So it's been good, man. It all started for me in about 2014. I started doing modern fire behavior stuff with a guy from Peoria named Tom Penley. And back then, Steve Kerber had just started it with Derek Alconis called the Weekend Firefighter. So we developed in Mesa that whole transitional attack thing. In 2014 is when we started to develop that. And you may know her. Her name's Megan Bauman. She works for Peoria. It used to be Cooley back in the day when she worked with me in Mesa. But her and I sat there and made a PowerPoint right after I did this whole rapid intervention PowerPoint. We got crew of the year for this rapid intervention thing we did at a task level. We were just crushing it, man. The statistics on that were awesome. But when I was developing that program for our city, I started reading about flow path and fire behavior and stuff like that, heat release rate. And I'm like, man, I got to get into this. So Megan and I did a PowerPoint in 2014 called Preventing the Mayday. And all we did is talk about flow paths and fire behavior. And then my career just kind of took off from there. In 99, I was all about the TRT, and did technical rescue. We had the squads. 2001, rolled around with 9/11. We're doing white powder calls, all kinds of stuff. So TRT and hazmat was kind of my wheelhouse back in the day. Um, and I was young and just having fun. Probably 2000 and right around that 15, 16 mark, I started really getting into nozzle work, understanding fire behavior, reading a lot. And then I started down that path of the Copper State Fire Conference. You know what I mean? And then we did that. And then we started teaching stuff at Arizona State Fire School in 2017 called Tactical Hose Management, where we brought in nozzle forward and 2.5 techniques from gaining relative superiority in the exponential engine. And 2 years later, I think 2000, it was maybe 2019, we changed it to zip, and you guys still teach that today. So it was good.
So what was what made you decide that, hey, you're starting to obviously branch out at this point in your career and really expand your knowledge as a progressive, efficient, effective fireman? But with that said, what was when did Chris say, like, man, the fools chapter would be cool? Like, why'd you pull that trigger?
Dude, that was super early on. It was before I heard about Fire Nuggets. I wanted to take off, get some like-minded firemen together. The Fools grassroots used to be like more beer drinking than anything else. And then we finally got some structure to it around the country. But yeah, just needed to get some guys together so we can preach against that mediocrity, man. We embrace it way too much. It's crazy. So, and we don't know what we don't know, which is even crazier to me. So to not get out and train and do stuff. So yeah, man, I pulled the trigger on the Fools. And like I said, that branched right into Tactics on Tap right until about COVID hit. And then everything kind of slowed way down.
So that was kind of the death of the fools chapter of COVID.
Yeah, and at least the meetings, right? So we couldn't meet at the bars anymore because we were literally pulling hose through bars. We had forcible entry classes in the bar. It started off super small and maybe 5, 10 people. And then but there was a lot to learn back then, right? We had to learn about bidirectional and unidirectional flow path. We had to learn about door control. We had to learn about low pressure nozzles and low pressure hose. We had to learn about interior firefighting and gas cooling and surface cooling, what the difference is. So as that started to preach, it got bigger and bigger and bigger to where I had to find a bar with a projector. So, and I would end up doing it twice a month because one of them would just be jam packed with dudes and the other one would kind of be a little bit slower because the two shifts or whatever would come on one day. But we'd have 50, 60 people in the bar.
Wow.
At least. And like I said, we're doing basically hot classes in there after we're running through a presentation, which is on training. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. And once COVID hit, the meetings just stopped, unfortunately. So
All right, so from the fools, you kind of said you were talking about the fire nuggets. So let's transition into the fire nuggets. So the fools is kind of dying down a little bit. Fire nuggets, obviously, your involvement is ramping up. So what was your role with the fire nuggets? What are you proud of? Kind of, or tell the audience really what you were involved with, and then what you took away or what you were able to help influence the American Fire Service from that opportunity.
wow, man, there's so much. In 2000 and probably 15, I started to bring in key players from around the country. Notably, like Brian Brush came out. We just solely worked on 2.5 inch and medium diameter handline stuff. We did it out in Superstition. I brought in Mark Von Oppen and Dr. David Griffin for leadership classes. And if you don't know who those guys are, Mark is. So he would always talk about the importance of a senior man and mentorship. So I was like, man, people got to know about this. We don't put enough emphasis on our senior firefighters here in Arizona. I need to blast that out. Dr. David Griffin was the pump operator of the Charleston 9 tragedy in the Super Sofa store. So to listen to what he has to say about, and I listen to your podcast and you're on the same page as me, the way we always done it phrase is the most dangerous phrase in the American Fire Service. And if you haven't seen Dr. David Griffin, he'll just solidify that for you because they lost 9 guys. And then, well, that's the way we've always done it, to the point where afterwards they said, well, we wouldn't change a thing until they needed to answer questions and change. So I brought those guys in. That was important. I brought in Peter Van Dorp from ISFSI, the International Society for Fire Service Instructors, right? Awesome deal. Peter Van Dorp broke out like all the fire behavior stuff, the new studies of the flow path. So we're rocking 2016, 17, 18 right now. And then, like I said, in State Fire School, everybody is watching this nozzle forward stuff and going, what the hell is going on? I've got tiny, tiny people flowing 2.5 at, 327 gallons a minute, 326 gallons a minute, gallons a second. And they're 100-pound female in gear and they're moving it better than most dudes, right? So that took off like wildfire. So I got to give a shout out to Dave Colson, which again is on your department. I've got 2 people that I invited to teach with me, but I love so many guys on Glendale Fire, man. I can't express it enough. But Dave Colson, Tammy, I'm going to mess up her last name. Sifra, right? So Tammy, Dan LaFond, and a couple other guys, they come to take my class the second year, right? So not 2017, 2018. Sold out both years in a row at State Fire School. And Dave tells me like a year later, he goes, "Hey, bro, I'm driving to the class with Dan LaFond." And he goes, "Man, I'm as open-minded as the next guy, but I feel like we're about to waste 3 days of our life." Right? So that's what Dave tells me. And he goes, "Dude, 30 minutes into your class, I wondered what I did with 14 years of my career." Right? So that's a cool statement. And, I've heard it a couple times, which is super humbling to me. And I know the information's getting out there. I'm sharing it. Sometimes I delivered it a little wrong. We can get into that too. But, it took off. So now I walk through, the Hall of Flame and I see dudes in the clamp. I see them doing the clamp slide. I see them doing the Camella or the lock off. Jay Camella is a friend of mine. He's like, "Slayer, it's not the Camella." I'm like, "Well, bro, I learned it from you, so I give credit where credit's due. It's the Camella." So it's always going to be the Camella lock. But it just took off. So it's cool to see all these departments doing some form of it, doing an accordion forward. And some actually got out and took the nozzle forward class, and some, I don't know if anybody's actually taken a class from like Brian Brush themselves or Brumley, but some of the techniques are from there. I blended them at State Fire School. It all gets lumped into, hey, it's the nozzle forward. It's not really, but it was cool. We can get into a lot of details with that, but to know that I had a little piece of it, and then a couple guys like Colson and Tammy and LaFond and guys from Gilbert that believed what I had to say, was really cool to think that I had a little piece to do with that. And the guys took it to heart and went, "Man, I want to be a better fireman, a better firefighter," and they ran with it. So a year later, I invited Dave and Tammy to come teach with me, and then and they're still embracing it and teaching it in Glendale and the ZIP, so the zero impact period stuff. So I changed it 3 years later, I think. After we did tactical hose management for 3 years, I said, "Hey, let's do ZIP." And they're like, "Well, what's that?" And I'm like, "Well, I want to identify our shortcomings." And those 3 shortcomings are, we have shitty nozzle work and hose deployments, we have down ladder culture, and we can talk about culture later. We got a crappier search culture, right? And then we got shitty forcible entry techniques. So we're JV, maybe varsity, but certainly not a professional level at any of those, on any organization from what I've seen. There's the 1%ers, but I still walk into departments and their balance points aren't marked on their ladders. A 24-foot ladder is a single person throw. It's a perfectly balanced ladder. Do you know the difference between a duo safety ladder and an alkalite? Do you know you can use it fly in, fly out? What's going to separate you from a professional firefighter to somebody that's just collecting a paycheck? And dude, I can get into all of that, with just nozzle work and knowing your weapons. So that's how the Fools took off anyways. That's a long story, but we had so many shortcomings that we identified in the Valley. I just wanted to start fixing those at the most fundamental level. And that avenue, fortunately for me, was the Fools, Tactics on Tap. And I told my chiefs, I'm like, "Hey, you do this." They're like, "Why?" I'm like, "Because I'm going to do it at a bar. I'm going to do it on my days off, and you guys can't control any of it. So it's awesome, but do me a favor. At the end of all of your stuff, put, these are the views of Chris Slayer and my experience, and not the views of my department." Done. So that's how that journey started. And that's why I wanted to start the Fools and went into the transition. Was Fire Nuggets has a wallet, right? If the Fools is membership dues and connections, Right. So you need to know other fools that will come in and do it for your fools chapter, which is, for those who don't know, the Fraternal Order of Leatherhead Society, which is the fools. But when Fire Nuggets, they have the wallet and the ability for me to make these connections and network to bring these people out to Arizona. So the first Copper State, it's funny when I heard your podcast, I was like, yes, they're not only doing zip, is they're calling their shit Copper State, which, I'm like, it was funny for me because I'm trying to think of the name of the conference. I'm like, what is it? Because we're the Grand Canyon State. We're not really the Copper State. So I'm like, I'm just going to call it Copper State because it's my initials. So I'm just going to put my spin on it. So that's why I called it. The Copper State Fire Conference. The first one was freaking amazing. Chandler hosted it, and we did Brothers in Battle. We did 10 hot classes that go around. And guys complained, man, you guys are searching off hose lines. Yeah, we're searching off hose lines, bro. It says it in volume 2. And I'll get into, I'm so sick of hearing it's not in volume 2 crap. It blows me away. It's like, this is bigger than our departments. There's 700 people here from all over the country, right? I've got guys from Sweden, Hawaii. Some of those guys search off hose lines, bro. If you don't want to, either elevate your game and get proficient at that, or don't take that with you, but let the other dudes that do that absolutely do it. Because there's cities and states that still do that all the time, a lot of them with truck work. They're very proficient at that. And if you train, then it's not a big deal because risk is managed by competence.
Well, I'll tell you what, Chief, I'm just in awe like now listening because myself and our organization, we wholeheartedly believe in everything you just said. Searching off hose lines, right? Being an effective, forward-thinking fireman, be able to adapt to every situation that you come on and not be pigeonholed by you cannot ventilate on a tile roof, search without a hose line, bullshit, right? All the way through. Instead of, hey, let's empower our firemen and give them the options and the training. And then if they feel like it's deemed necessary for that situation, since that's what we operate in the gray, then they were able to utilize that. And we're comfortable because they are well trained because we support them. Or we have the exact opposite, which is what we're used to of absolutely not. That's a outside the risk management profile, insert whatever negative, it's too dangerous, yada, yada, yada. I mean, I remember when I first came out here, I was a fireman back east for 11 years, went through the ranks all the way up to lieutenant, and it was a very common practice. And I remember when I first got hired, I had asked the question, hey, why don't we search through windows? And immediately, I mean, between the looks and then like, I go, what? It's like, what? Like, what do you mean, what? And they're like, bro, that's too dangerous. I'm like, it's too dangerous. I said, it's one of the most simple technique. It's actually safer, and we're going through the entire process. And then I would stop and be like, okay, hold on. Since this is so unsafe, go back and find me how many line of duty deaths came from event under search isolate, because we already know the answer. Yeah. Fucking zero, not a single one. And of course that shuts them up, but they still walk away and like, oh, well, we'll never do that, right? Well, guess what? Like, this is what we're starting to teach now. We just rebrand it under a different name called targeted search. It's the same idea.
Yeah, targeted
search. Right?
So it is funny because, that came about from that first Copper State Fire Conference. And I got, man, we don't do that. It's not in volume 2. I said, it is absolutely in volume 2. And whoever's telling you that either hasn't read it or they're just naive, because volume 2 says that the incident commander shall, not should, shall direct a primary search into all, and all is underlined, involved and exposed occupancies that can be entered. That falls in with our risk management plan. And again, risk is managed by competence. If you train and you're very aware of your time frame from the minute you break that window to clear the sash, to sweep the floor before you sound, right? The minute you go in, the next guy comes up, he's got you an oriented search with your thermal imager. You go to try to isolate that door, check behind the bed, under the bed, in the toy box. We are searching for any place your kids, nephews, nieces play hide and seek. That's what we're searching for, right? Just don't do a blanketed search. Any place your kids or their friends would play hide and seek, you better open the washer and dryer. You better open the towel closet. You better open the kitchen cabinets, because God forbid you miss one of them, right? So, dude, we need to embrace different things like that. And honestly, people just want to be dicks, because when I got hired, we had a minimum company standard that was a 35-foot ladder stand to a third-story window with a victim removal. Well, guess what that is, bro? It's VES, right? We just put a name to it. And then you want me to tie a stupid IFSTA knot or something around the victim before I get him out the window. I can do that too. But 20 years later, we're going, hey man, maybe we should shut the door because this thing called flow path and, or gradient or air track, whatever you want to call it, right? James Braidwood in 1856 wrote a book about it, right? If you want it, I got a copy. It's if you want to learn something new, open an old book. We could search off those lines, but it's condition dependent and skill level dependent, right? So there are things that I am willing to do being a captain for 17 years that I probably would not ask a younger captain to do until they get that experience level, right?
Yeah, well, completely understood, and I wholeheartedly agree. It's like we are saying, case by case, individual, and kind of sparked something that Captain Noah Katz says, works for City of Phoenix. Super freaking
Yep,
hard
I know Noah.
charger, great guy, right? So he always says with this company, and he teaches, the question is always, what is searchable space? And everyone tries to put a volume on it, or the amount of fire, or BTUs, or square footage, blah 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 blah. And I like how he prioritizes it. And I hope I'm not butchering it too much for Noah here, but he basically says, do you have the equipment, or do you have the training, and do you have the personnel? If you say yes to all three, then there's searchable space, period, the end. And I love that, because it's putting it on us now, saying, or because your searchable space and my searchable space are going to be different. And that just sums it up right there. But the fact that, like, he marches it out, it puts it on the member, which I believe is the best option, because they're the ones currently on scene trying to make those hard decisions. That's what they pay us to do, is in that right front seat.
Dude, I love, my battalion right now is just crushing it. I think I posted some ladder work and engine work they did the other day. A 2-story condo, fire blowing out the window when we got there. I balanced it to a first alarm, and by the time they dispatched the first alarm, they had initial knockdown of the fire. The ladder company was to the roof, and I didn't even get many more units on scene before I had all my tactical objectives met. These guys are just they are getting it. And every 3 months I bring them in. I'm like, okay, we're going to go over weapon selection today. We're going to talk about gallons per second. We're going to talk about surface cooling and versus gas cooling. We're going to talk about, when to use which weapon, and more importantly, why. So I'm not developing habits. In the academy, we develop habits, right? Your hose line is going to reach every time. It's never going to be short, and we're giving them a false sense of security. The 1 3/4 is going to put out every single fire they get in the academy, right? So there's no reason to tell them when to use a bigger line. There's no reason to tell them, what's the difference between the 3 fire flow formulas, right? The Roy or Nelson or the Iowa State University flow formula versus the National Fire Academy flow formula, or the spin off that, right? These guys aren't making choices. They're developing habits. They might as well be crackheads, right? So I need these firefighters to start making choices when they step off the rig. And those choices begin with, what line am I taking and why? Do I have a nozzle tip that I can make adjustments or not? Or do I have to pick a bigger line, right? Where's the most advantageous place for me to fight this fire from the flow path versus the inlet or exhaust, right? The fastest way to put water on that fire is the correct way. I don't care how you do it, interior or exterior. And then, am I using interior door control? And exterior door control, and all kinds of just little things like that. And it's cool to watch my guys now. Years ago, I still have all the recordings because one of my chiefs told me, I don't need to know what a bidirectional flow path is. I'm like, well, you should, bro. Like, because that tells you a lot about how I'm going to handle this fire. It's going to tell you what my nozzle work is and what positions I'm going to try to move these products of combustion to, right? And if it's a unidirectional flow path, then you're gonna know that I'm gonna address that fire before I make my way above it. And that's good from our 360s, that exponential size up. So your firefighter size up is gonna be your line length and location, right? So how long does this line need to be to get to my objective? Because the pre-connects killed the ability to estimate a stretch. And that allows me to sit back now as a company officer, and now I'm weighing my tactical objectives. So looking at my risk management plan. I'm looking at my critical fireground factors. I'm picking those top 3 that are going to kill me while my firefighters are making a decision of which line to pull. And then I can get into my strategy and develop my IAP, right? I can look at that big picture while they're looking at the firefight itself. So we got to train our guys. We got to take the time to tell them the why. Yeah.
I mean, the why is huge, and we've been preaching the why for a while. And I feel like for some reason the why is fairly new because it was the same system when I came up as you did. It was more shut the fuck up and listen to what I have to say, and it's gospel no matter what it is, good information, bad information. I don't know because I'm too green right now, kind of thing. Where now the kids have computers, in their hands and they can access information immediately and they fact check you, which they should.
They should.
Yeah, I tell the kids, hey, fact check everything I teach you. And even better, if you come across something that seems easier or better, show me.
Yeah.
And then if it works, teach me. That'd be amazing. But I just don't know why we haven't emphasized on the why before. But I'm glad that we're finally doing it. So when you're bringing all this new, so you're involved in Fire Nuggets, Fool's Chapter, everything's going. Obviously, your passion is for training the fire service just to be the baddest mofo out there. How hard was it to bring all that information back to your department? And did they buy off on it? Was it like trying to pull hairs, or was it a pretty easy process? Walk the listeners through how that was for you, sir.
So there was so much change. I think people were tired of what Chris Slayer had to say. To be honest, right or wrong, I approached it poorly. Right, I am still not allowed to train my department at training. So I was told I teach dangerous stuff. And I can go on and on, right? So I'm like, well, you mean the stuff that's published and now taught in all 5 regional academies, right? My training division wouldn't allow me to train our training staff. So I'll just put it like this. I was invited to go to Golden Ranch, and my training staff and Gilbert's training staff sent their guys to Golden Ranch, which is down by Tucson, two hours away plus, right? Company cars, overtime, hotel rooms, when I could have done it for free at one of our academies. I'd have done it for them, right? But I can't teach there. I'm not allowed. So when I started Tactics on Tap, thankfully, I had some really good supportive battalion chiefs that gave me the whole, hey, write a disclaimer. You're right. We can't do anything about it, right? As long as you put that, we're good. So I host the first Fire State Fire Conference, right? Or the Copper State Fire Conference. And then we do another one at Gilbert, which again was awesome. And then we did another one and a women's conference. You know what I mean? So that one was cool. Noah came to me, I don't know, gosh, we've been friends for a while now. He's been making a good push, and he gets it. Uh, so we've been collaborating for a bit, and I know he's in the same boat with his agency at some point. And I honestly tried to warn him. I'm like, be careful. Like, we're still not ready for some of the stuff out there. Like, there are people that I would love to bring in because their message is on point, but our chiefs would, if there was a lump of coal in their ass, it would be a diamond after those guys got done, right? Because they wouldn't know what to do with the information. So believe it or not, I'm careful with who I pick. When Noah wanted to bring those guys out again, I'm like, hey man, I did that already at the first Copper State. And I almost didn't have a second Copper State. So when we did the first Phoenix conference out here, we had to be very selective, and they still got mad at something one of the guys said. You know what I mean? So something about our risk management plan. He's like, well, you'll risk a lot, but what does that mean? He's right. What does that mean? Risking a lot to me, it's like saying big fire, big water. What is that? Right? We're supposed to be a professional organization, but if I ask a group of 20 people what big fire, big water is, I'm going to get 20 different answers, right? I'm just
Yeah.
gonna. So what is it, right? So what is risk a lot? It's going to be different for me than it is for a brand new firefighter or a brand new captain that hasn't been put into these situations where they have to make critical thinking decisions, and they just don't have the same recognition pride decision making, the Rolodex to draw from, right? So it is subjective, and it should be, just like our most of our SOPs. You know what I mean?
What saying that, either we don't believe in your message or we don't believe in the risk, the inherent risk, whatever the case might be. How did you continue to plug away and not get discouraged and either, hey, I'm going to go to a different department or I'm going to just mind my own business and, finish out my career quietly? How did you just keep going through all that negativity from those guys?
I don't know. It just wasn't that hard. Like I just figured, my message is sound. I believe in what I'm saying. When I go teach and learn from conferences, and bring it back, this isn't my opinion. This is scientifically backed data, that I'm bringing back through all the UL studies, through all the NIST studies, through the ATF Fire Research Lab. I'm not making this shit up, right? And so at some point, I just wanted to say, screw them, right? But really, I wanted to say, you know what? The rules are never more important than the mission. My job is to bring my guys home safe and not at the end of the day, the end of a 25-year career. So I got to share this information with them, make them a thinking firefighter all the way through, give them the skill levels they need, pull from their strengths and weaknesses, and put it all together as an organization. And my vision went beyond that is because I knew I couldn't just hold it in Mesa, right? I just couldn't keep this and be like, ha, we know all this shit and you guys don't. So I grab a bunch of dudes from Gilbert and I grab a bunch of dudes from Glendale and say, hey, I need you to come with me and share this message because now it's in all the regional academies, right? So some took longer than others, but it's there. I remember getting a text from Chief LaFond and watching guys like on twister dots with an overpumped nozzle trying to hold it straight out and play like whack-a-mole on the burn rooms. Tempe was doing the same stuff. I'm like, what are you doing? Like you're not teaching them anything productive. Like, no, but Dan texted me that and he's like, only if there's a better way, and now we're teaching people to flow a 2.5 at 300 gallons a minute using their feet and mask up. You know what I mean? So it's cool to see. It's cool to get the text messages and say, dude, I see this, but, and sometimes I still get discouraged. Like, one of our organizations a year ago missed 4 kids in a bedroom. We missed a search opportunity the other day. The guy operating the drone of all things said, hey man, it looks like you got an isolated bedroom in the back that has searchable space. So we missed that opportunity. And sometimes that eats me up a little bit. I'm like, man, I hear my guys on the radio. There's a couple phrases that I hate. One is it's fully involved. Hate it. Until you get around that structure, it is not, you don't get to declare that, right? There's going to be searchable space. And I love the term searchable space that we're trying to preach. So some of my guys are on the radio. Hey, Chief, this is heavily involved, but I've got searchable space in the back. Okay, do it. I'm going to pull it. You need pull a hose line back there, have another crew to come just in case. But yeah, search it. If we can occupy that space and put our turnouts in between Mrs. Smith and the problem, then that's your job, right? So, and survivable space is up to God. And remind me in a minute, and I'll tell you that another story of a rescue we did because we just did the Grabs podcast. But we missed that opportunity the other day, and like I said, the drone pilot said, "Hey, we got an isolated bedroom in the back. I think you could." You get it. So the guys went in, and sure enough, there was a body in there. We missed that opportunity. I think I was talking to you earlier. I'm not sure. I've been talking to so many different people, but my friend Grant, I was talking to him, and he's like, years ago, I was trying to search a vacant house. Right, it was a sold sign in the uh, front yard, came out as vacant. No furniture in when I went in. Smoke down to the floor. It was a kitchen fire. We didn't search it because there's no furniture. Sold sign in the yard. Figured it was vacant. Sure enough, body in the house. Right. The son stayed for an extra couple days. So he goes, dude, that call ate me up for years. He goes, now I kind of forgive myself. He goes, and I don't know if it would have changed the outcome, but we missed an opportunity. We didn't give Mrs. Smith or, patient X the best opportunity of survival because we wrote it off as a vacant house. We wrote it off as, there's nobody alive in there. That's not your call, bro. That's up to God. And so if we can occupy the space, we should. And he brought up an interesting point. He goes, hey, line of duty deaths are way down, but firefighter suicides are way up. So is there a correlation between how this pendulum swung and a culture of safety versus a culture of suppression? Because if you have the culture of extinguishment, by definition, you have a culture of safety. It's safer for you and it's safer for the occupants inside.
Well, it's funny because I preach to the kids this, and I mean even firemen in general. It's when we start talking about the safety culture and aggressive firemen, and how I'm a firm believer that aggressive fireman is a safer fireman. I always tell them the same thing. If we are uberly aggressive from the get go in the very beginning, we deem the scene safe. It makes it better for everybody, the civilians, us, surroundings, the environment, everything under the sun. But it's when we get in trouble is when we decide to be uberly aggressive way late into the game, that 20-25 minute timestamp. And that's when we get into trouble. But the problem is people then associate that as aggressive firefighting. That what led to either a line of duty or injury or even just a close call or a near miss. But that's why I always like to preach. No, being aggressive from the get-go will deem everything safe. So if you want to be a safety-minded individual, you should be an aggressive, efficient fireman, which is the opposite of what most people think, I believe. I don't know.
For sure. Aggressive is not reckless, right?
There you go.
Aggressive is rapidly changing your risk management plan for the better, right? Rapidly going through those tactical objectives so we can change into a defensive strategy if we need to, but most of the time things get better, right? So aggressive isn't reckless. I'm not saying make stupid decisions. I need to educate you, and that starts from the very beginning. Hey, let's talk about fire behavior. Let's talk about the way we spec our rigs, right? Are you, you know, is your bumper line an inch and 3/4 at 150, and you got two cross lays inch and 3/4 at 150, and then you have a load that maybe be a 2.5 to a gated Y with a pre-connected line of an inch and 3/4 with 150, and now the majority of your weapons on your 1,500 gallon or plus a minute pumper that comes with 500 to 750 gallons, are you pigeonholing your firefighters to a line that's 150? You know, or do you have a pre-connected 2 inch or 2.5 where you can go big water, right? So let them know, like, hey, this is your fire flow formulas, right? So if you take your National Fire Academy formulas, you take your Royer Nelson formulas and our Iowa State University formulas, and you get into some of that stuff, and the National Fire Academy formula boils down to, and with some caveats when you get to bigger water, GPM times 3, right? So if you have a, what is it, 75 foot by 50 foot square foot place with 12-foot ceilings, I think it's 45,000 square feet. You divide that by 100 according to the National Fire Academy. If you take 150 gallons per minute, right? Multiply that by 3, right? You've got 450 gallons or 450 square feet of fire your inch and 3/4 can put out. Anything beyond that now is big fire, right? So when I tell them, if I take picture your kid's bedroom, it's probably 10 by 12, right? 120 square feet. You multiply that by 4, you get 480 square feet. So if you can picture those rooms in any configuration, any one you want, 4 high, 2 by 2, and think of that volume of fire, that's a lot of fire, right? So now I could pull my inch and 3/4 and say, hey, I can get this with 150 gallons a minute. which is a lot of our fog nozzles. Now, if I have that much fire, what are my choices? Can I go 2 inch or 2.5 inch? Or does my fog nozzle have a breakaway 7/8 and I can get a, different flow through that, right? Or 15/16. And for God's sake, does your firefighter even know the difference, right? Because if I'm a cop, I know if I have a taser, I know if I have a beanbag gun, I know if I have less lethal, I know I have mace, I know I have a 5.56 and maybe a 9 millimeter, a 40 cal, or a 45 on my hip. I know I have those weapons. I know where I keep my magazines. But I ask the firefighter what that 7/8 does. They don't know the freaking difference, right? So
Scary.
if they can drop the tip off that 7/8 and go, now I'm going from the top of my head and I'm not that smart. But at 40 psi at the tip, I'm getting 145 GPM. At 50 at the tip, I'm getting 161 GPM. 60 at the tip, I'm getting 174 GPM. If I have a 15/16, I'm getting 165 at 40, 185 at 50, and 202 at 60. Right? Find the sweet spot. We're fighting fire, not hose. But if I can educate my firefighters on just that, right? Why are you pulling this hose line? Because that I can get with this. And if I don't get it, I can drop the nozzle. It's over pumped like this, and I can still get it with this. I still meet my fire flow formulas, and I can get it with this weapon. Now I have a thinking firefighter,
That's
right?
amazing. And with all that math, it's like I hope if anybody takes anything away from this podcast is just that formula alone, because it breaks it down. I mean, that'll help you on so many different levels of, like you said, what weapon do you choose? That's the verbiage you're using, right?
Yeah. What weapon are you take? If you're taking your PW can is 2.5 gallons,
Right.
right? You got to hold it a certain way to get the bubble just right to get, the maximum flow out of this line. But your 1 3/4 is 2.5 gallons a second, right? So it's one PW can every second. Your 2.5 is with the correct nozzle is roughly 5 gallons a second. So it's 2 PW cans every second that you're throwing out this fire. A 5 gallon Home Depot paint bucket every second, right? And a 55 gallon drum in 11 seconds. That's how much water you're putting on this fire. And I'll get into that in a second where we started the change and I started to make some waves in Mesa. And then when we're talking about our deck gun, you put your 1.5 inch tip, you get 600 GPMs, which is 10 gallons a second. It's exponential, 2.5510, right? Now I can go rooms on fire, residential floors on fire, or commercial fires, and buildings on fire. There's a generality of your weapon selection. Yeah, simplify. Simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. So
But outside of that, when it comes down to, is there anything else that's like your bare basics that you want to make sure your suppression officers know or your firemen know, really, especially being on the engine?
sure. Yeah. I mean, that's just getting there, right? That's not even, that's just knowing your weapons and where to take. When we talk about opening the door and doing your 360, you know, when you're doing your 360, you're looking for the stuff that's going to kill you, right? You're looking for that bidirectional, unidirectional flow path. You're looking for the best access to the fire. You're looking for, multiple points of origin where this can be arson. You're looking for a 30-mile-an-hour wind from the Charlie side. If you're going to go in through Alpha, you're betting your butt on a pane of glass, right? You're putting yourselves at the end of a blowtorch. So what are we teaching our guys and how are we teaching them to do it just for the 360? Then we open the door. You're looking at your, life lift location layout. You're listening for screams of help. You're looking at the neutral plane. Where is it, right? If you have a neutral plane, the fire's probably on the level you're on. If it's from ceiling to floor, or I mean, it's probably below you. And if it's above the threshold of the door, it's probably above you, right? So just a little size up like that. What's your air track doing? Do I have little tornadoes pulling in because this is event limited fire? So now my firefighters can make choices, right? They're looking behind the door. They're getting their nozzle ready. They're checking their air volume and pattern, right? They're using purposeful water. Once they check their air volume and pattern, because if you're in my class, you bet your butt I'm putting a glove in your hose at some point and making you do a jamming drill with your nozzle. Hey, what's your choices here? You know what I mean? Because I don't want you to find out you have debris in your nozzle at the seat of the fire. That is not a good time to find out that you didn't check this is not about bleeding the air. I don't know why we still teach that, right? Water should flow through your hose about 22 feet per second. If you have a 200-foot hose, you need to be flowing that for a minimum of 10 seconds to clear the debris from that pump to your nozzle and make sure it's flowing well, right? So when my firefighters understand that, now I'm like, okay, now we're picking the right weapons. We're making the right choices. Now let's talk about interior and exterior attack. Let's talk about, are we shutting these interior doors to buy people time? Are we shutting the interior doors because if this gets sporty, I have a point of refuge? Is my nozzleman, and I'll say nozzleman, sorry if I offend anybody, but is my nozzleman wetting those doors so I can look back with my thermal imager and see a black, cool door that I know is going to buy me 5 minutes of time if I need to take refuge behind that door or pull a victim back to that point? If I can get people to close interior doors and then go search them, awesome, right? We should be taking the time to do it. We're buying time. Thorough primary search, allowing us a better space to occupy. So are we teaching our firefighters that? So once you wet the door, you can give yourself a point of refuge so we can do a more thorough, search for that primary. If we're isolating interior doors, we're saving property. If we miss somebody on a primary, they're better off on a secondary potentially. It's buying us time on a primary to get to these doors that might be further down this search area. And if it gets sporty, we've got a point of refuge. We need to start teaching our firefighters this. Days of we're not going to squirt smoke are long gone, right? We're done with that, right? We talk about gas. I bet you if I asked any of your rookies right now how much gas expands in it, with a droplet of water, they can all tell me 1,700 times. But are we actually talking about contraction, right? We're talking about not upsetting the thermal layer, right? And if steam is so bad, why do they have it at the gym? I get in the steam room right now, right? So exactly 0 firefighters have died from steam burns too, right? So sometimes steam is good. It's it's a very good suppression agent, steam, right? When we talk about humidity. So moisture, right? So, and that expands. So now I can get into, hey, let's make an educated choice about what you're doing with your nozzle, right? So let's talk about wetting the surfaces, how that your turnouts absorb energy. If I go in and I hear high heat, low visibility, I'm going to lose my mind. That is another blanket statement, just like fully involved, that I absolutely hate, right? What does that mean to me? High heat, low visibility. Are you standing up? Are you flowing water? Are you flowing low? Is the high heat at the ceiling or is the high heat at your hips, right? What does that mean to me? Because if you're not flowing water, your turnouts are absorbing energy like a convective air current. It's holding that energy in. And so are the walls, right? You're in a cooker. You need to start relieving that by using a wall ceiling wall technique or an O technique, depending on your pattern. And I want to do the wall ceiling wall. You start with the leading edge, paint it back as best you can, right? Your job as a nozzleman is to create and maintain survivable space, right? We're maintaining that now. So we own it. We're taking it back. Once I teach them that they need to wet that space, the wetter the better. They'll isolate those areas. Now we can talk about what we're doing with air track and air entrainment with our nozzles and where do I want to move those products to combustion to. Because if I'm rotating my nozzle too fast or using some type of fog pattern, eventually that's going to have to come back on me because there's no opening. And now we need to talk about coordinated ventilation, right? But when I talk about interior nozzle work, you've got to understand the benefits between surface cooling and gas cooling and steam, and more importantly, gas contraction. Because you may get lift, but once you start cooling that space below 212, now you get massive contraction. It makes it better for everybody.
All right, so we know how you feel about flow pass. We know how you feel about choosing the correct weapon. So you were kind of segueing already. So we're talking about coordinated ventilation. So ventilation across the American Fire Service right now is a super hot topic. Typically, vertical ventilation is really what they're talking about, but I want to hear Chief Slayer's opinion on just ventilation completely. So let's start with the coordinated ventilation because I already kind of know that you agree with this, but obviously I believe ventilation is a very important part of the suppression techniques. But just walk us down your modalities on ventilation, coordination, and everything under the sun, if you don't mind, when it comes down to just the ventilation and then the ladder work when it goes into the windows.
I think you need to be really versed at ventilation. Nothing should go away. So back in the day when we got hired 30 years ago, and we still watch it on UL today if we put the pieces together, right? We have modern furniture and legacy furniture. And the legacy furniture, when I walk into my grandma's house and lay a cold drink on her coffee table, she's going to give me something called the coaster. For those of you who are younger, right? It's little, like the size of a cookie or a 45 record. Look that up on Google. You and that coaster protects her wood coffee table from the condensation and moisture, right? Because that old furniture is going to absorb it. The new furniture is hydrophobic, right? It's made with plastics and wood and glues and laminate. So the heat release rate on those are faster, right? So we can watch them, flash over times with an opening and say, hey, flash over with modern furniture is 3 to 4 minutes. Flashover in the old legacy furniture is almost 30. So back then, with response times and deployment standards, vertical ventilation was on point. We had a lot of time to release that buoyancy driven smoke out, right? And that time is limited now for us. So vertical ventilation, I think it is important. If you have a good ladder captain, they also know when horizontal ventilation is going to be more beneficial. And horizontal ventilation, there's only two types of ventilation, horizontal and vertical. And each of those are enhanced by hydraulics or mechanics. You're either going to take a fan and blow it out, or you're going to hydraulically ventilate. So there's only horizontal and vertical. And if we know the tools that we have to enhance those, then we can understand whether we want PPV or hydraulic ventilation. So I'll never tell somebody that we should never vertically ventilate because there are times where I need that lift, right? Now, that being said, I need to communicate very well on the interior. Is that hole going to be big enough to lift that volume of smoke out? And where is it? Like we had a fire the other day and and I'll share this. One of my captains he did a good job. They couldn't find the seat of the fire. It was on the second story in a closet, arson fire. They couldn't find it, right? He looked and said that the walls are all the same color with the tick, right? All of a sudden, they start pulling some ceiling. They're looking for the fire. The safety officer's around the Charlie side and says, you got increased smoke production on the Charlie side. And then seconds later, they said, hey, we're the hottest we've ever been. And I've got fire blowing out the Alpha side window when these guys are retreating down the stairs. They end up doing a good transitional attack from the exterior to allow them back in. I said, okay, let's talk about what happened, right? So I said, you had a fire on the second floor, and that fire smoke was floor to ceiling. So what stage is that fire in? I was like, it's vent limited and probably going into decay because once the smoke reach flame height, it starts to go vent limited. It's drawing all the air it can. Once it goes below that, now you've got a vent limited fire that's going into decay, right? I said, you couldn't find the fire, so what did you do? He pulled ceiling. In a sense, he vertically ventilated, right? The fire was in a box. The smoke was in a box. And now they just gave it access to, another 1,000 cubic feet of space. So this buoyancy driven gas is now going up through the hole that they popped in the ceiling. And so what's the interior conditions doing, right? The interior conditions are getting a little better because all of that smoke is now going up through a vertical ventilation hole. But what's the fire doing? It's going back into growth, back into fully developed. And since they didn't open their nozzle and cool that space, right? They're not squirting smoke. but the walls have all now absorbed that energy. So they're all the same color in the tick, right? Now that energy has nowhere to go. So all of a sudden, this gets really hot, really fast, and I got fire blowing out that alpha side window, right? So your actions, interior and exterior, have consequences. So vertical ventilation's on point, horizontal ventilation's on point. We did a grab. I just did the grabs podcast. I think it gets released next month, but it was when I was a captain, so it was a bit ago. But they just asked us to do it. A lady was inside. Cops tried to get in before us. She was handicapped in one of those chairs that sit you up. It's those recliners. Heavy content conditions inside, not quite hoarder, but heavy content conditions. And she's sitting there and roll over down the hallway. I go in without a hose line and search one way. The other crew goes in with the hose line, and I hear the lady scream. So I start going over towards her, and I was like, man, you got to roll over down the hallway. You can't go out the front door. So they ended up doing a Denver drill to get her out the door or the window on the Charlie side. So it went super smooth. But that lady is sitting there, and she has COPD, right? So what do people with COPD have next to them all the time? Oxygen and cigarettes, right? So she's got her oxygen mask on, right? She's got a water bottle dumping over her head, and she's sitting there breathing clean air just like we are in an environment where they're like, there's nobody alive in there. Like, yeah, she's alive, bro. She's yelling. So I guess that's the thing, once we understand the little things, weapon selection, when we're searching off a hose line, when we're getting aggressive with fire attack, when we're ventilating, when we're pulling ceiling, do those actions have negative consequences on the firefight? And surface cooling and isolating bedrooms, man, we're winning. We're just winning, but we're not there yet. Some dudes are. They're on point. And some dudes I'm like, dude, I've watched guys throw ladders through forcible entry, and I'm like, you're JV at best. I mean, take your professional firefighter sticker off. Get rid of your dragon tattoo and your sticker, and go take a class, bro. Yeah, I mean, you got to take some pride and ownership. The Maltese Cross is the most trusted symbol in the United States of America, if not the world, right? And that is earned through our older generations trust and training and what they should or what we should take pride in the future.
Yeah, I love you said that because I've heard that a couple different times, and it's not the individual. It's exactly what you said. It's that cross. It's a tradition that our brothers and the old timers charge forward, and it's our job now to pass on those traditions and keep that alive and keep that Maltese cross what it is. So since we're on traditions, let's talk about. I always like to kind of break down your department for each guest. So what you kind of in the beginning were like our traditions with search suck, ladder sucks. So, but what are your traditions in your department when it comes down to your search, your ladder, and your engine company functions? Because I know all departments are strong and typically one and weak in most, but where do you guys pride yourself? And then obviously, where would you like to see your department in the future?
It's not the same battalion to battalion, shift to shift, right? I don't know if I'm a good leader or not. You know what I mean? I'm a student of leadership. I've been asked to teach a couple leadership classes, and so I put something together for the future here. I'm going to Idaho and Colorado to do a leadership class, but I know what I'm not, and that's a micromanager. So what I am is somebody that gives you intent. Here's my intent. My intent is for you to go rescue Mrs. Smith and solve her problem. Now I'm going to give you the tools to make some decisions to do that. If we make a poor decision, that's okay, right? That is okay. We're going to talk about it later. You have permission to screw up, and we'll get past this, right? When do you prioritize and deprioritize a water supply, right? When are you going in on tank water? So all of that stuff we discuss, and I never give them a hard fast, you will never lay a water supply. You will always lay a water supply. That's not me. Here's the intent. If you can solve this problem with X, with what you came with, please solve that problem. The longer you delay this, the more reliant I am going to become on my resources, right? And I approach every fire as I'm defense, right? I look at it and go, okay, the fire's the quarterback. It's called the shots. It's running the play, right? Where are my guys going to position themselves? It's 4th and 1, bitch, right? We're getting off the rig. We got our weapon selection. We're coming up, and now we're winning. We're going for it. But man, if you pull a line that's too short, if you pull a line that's inadequate, if you don't go in on tank water and waste 3 minutes and let them run that play, guess what? We just lost, right? And that goes all the way to speccing equipment. So it's 4th and 1. I line up my defense, and that first we'll say offensive line, but it's defense, right? I'm stopping that fire in its tracks. Now I have the ball and I'm running with it. Done. So traditionally, I think I've got some chiefs that are super micromanagers, like, and I don't agree with them. You know what I mean? I mean, I'll go to the mat with that. I've got chiefs that say, "Hey, stay on the truck until I call you." Well, guess what? We got clean cabs now, which I think suck, but now my reflex time is slowing down. I guarantee you, if you're the first 4 engines or apparatus on my fire scene, your job is not going to be to stay in the freaking truck. Put your shit on, get ready to work, right? But I've got chiefs like that. Don't do it until I tell you. That's not the fireman I want on my scene. So I want those firefighters to be able to be equipped with those decisions. So I can't say we have a good tradition in any of those. I can tell you our search culture needs to be more aggressive. Everybody will tell you life safety is our priority, but we're not looking for searchable space before we say fully involved. We're not looking for searchable space before we say high heat, low visibility, right? Is your nozzle open? We need to change our search culture to allow us to win, and act like it's your family inside. So our ground ladder culture is freaking terrible, right? I don't even have a full complement of ladders on my ladder trucks. We should be throwing ladders until we run out of windows or run out of ladders. Your balance point should be marked. That is non-negotiable, right? You should know how to throw most of your ladders 1 or 2 people. You should know that if you put a Halligan or some ladder chocks in that little third hole, if you put the pick in there, that you can offset that about 14 inches, at least 1 rung. So if you're a little shorter, you can pop that ladder up, right? I'm vertically challenged. I needed to learn some of those tricks. So there's a lot of little things that we need to get better at. I tell you, you just said it. What did you teach your academy today? You said you're doing ladder bailouts?
Yeah, they were doing fire ground survival, so they were doing all the ladder bailouts today.
Okay, so let me ask you a question because I don't know if we're mutually exclusive. Your ladder companies, how many means of egress do they get off a roof?
2.
Two. Opposite ends, load-bearing walls, right? Engine company, 3rd-story apartment complex. You throwing ladders to the Charlie side windows all the time?
They should be, but they're absolutely not.
Okay,
My world, yes. In the real world, no, they're not.
perfect. So my world, yes, too. So why in our SOPs is the ladder company afforded a different safety margin than a lit engine company?
That's a good question.
Yeah. So you just did bailouts with all your recruits.
Yes, sir.
Me as an IC, if I don't do my due diligence, now, and I know we got training scars, right? We're teaching firefighter bailouts or window hangs with 1 firefighter. You ever tried it with 2 or 4 or a crew hanging out of a window? That sucks. You ever tried to get a ladder up underneath them? That's even harder, right? But if we're throwing ladders diligently and change that ladder culture, I tell you what, if me and you got to hang out of a window together and wait for a ground ladder when there's an available ladder on every one of those trucks parked outside, if I live through this, bro, we're having words, right? So there should be a standard to where we know our weapons. Our firefighters have to know their weapons. Our crews have to do ladder stands, and we have to get a better search culture. You know, I felt bad for, I think it was Phoenix guys. They posted something on like Chief Miller using the Halligan backwards the other day. And I'm like, oh my God, like Noah had to be rolling over, you know. Honestly, I look at that and I laugh. I go, that's published in the IFSTA book like that. The fulcrum was totally illustrated wrong. But, you know, they're not mutually exclusive. I've watched companies do that, and we just don't put emphasis on those 3 things. And those are our bread and butter. That's why I did the zip class at State Fire School. I wanted to address the shortcomings we had in the valley, and those were the three things, right?
Yeah, so that's huge, and I know the video we're talking about with Phoenix because it's funny. I saw it and then thought the same thing immediately, like, oh, he's gonna be pissed, right? Because of course that is three dudes out of a 2,000 member department, and it's a bunch of hard chargers, right? But that's all it takes because now
And it's a mistake,
it
right?
it was
Like,
a mistake. You're
key to
right.
the, yeah.
I'm telling you right now, I tell when we teach forcible entry, I say, hey man, I guarantee you, you will, and I probably might before the end of the day too, will attempt to force it wrong at least once, right?
For sure.
And guess what?
Absolutely.
The trick though is you do it once and you go, wait a second, think of where my forces are applied. Oh, shit, dumbass, flip it around, or let me go forward instead of pry backwards, and then guess what? Problem solved. No big deal. We all make mistakes.
And honestly, that's probably our standard, right? I don't want to knock anybody, but forcible entry, we just don't focus on a lot, right? I've got a Maximus Rex and a Pro Bar. Can you tell me the difference in the mechanical advantage, right? It's math, right? The mechanical advantage of the Halligan, math. Where's the crotch on this at 5 inches? How long are your forks? Are you using a Maximus Rex with 2K tools? Is it 11-1 or a 5-1 mechanical advantage? Now we can get into why you gap set force, right? Are you using an 8-pound sledge for that? Because that's not what your ladder crew should have on the roof. They should have a blunt head pig or fox axe or something like that, right? It's different. You're not buying a Home Depot axe that doesn't have a slanted heel on the handle, because when you're using forcible entry, that axe should slide into that gap, right? That's why that little cutouts on the bottom of your axe at a 45-degree angle. So it falls into those slots. If you don't know that, you're JV. If you don't know bar to bar techniques and those difference in your weapons, get better. There's more information out there. The problem is we don't know what we don't know, right?
Yeah.
So gap set force, hit, drive, stop is the basics of the basics, but we never grow on that. There's a dude his name is Sam Hiddle in Kansas. Dude, that guy's a stud. Like, I wanted to give credit where credit was due to Chris Bloom. He used to be a Tucson Battalion Chief. He's the chief of Meridian, Idaho right now. He wrote an amazing article called Fire Service Branding, and he talks deep about the Maltese Cross. So I wanted to give him a shout out, and I forgot. So when we did the zip anyways, I realized we had some shortcomings. And a lot of those is because I didn't know what I didn't know, right? When I got out and started taking these nozzle classes going, what? You know what I mean? And then I was blessed enough to start the network through Fire Nuggets, reaching out to some old school dudes, getting involved. Like in 2016, I went to 6 different states and 2 different countries and trained with some of the best firefighters that I know to date. And they've forgotten more than I know about tactics and strategy. You know what I mean? They're just that good. I can bring back, I think I bring back what's important. And I try to bring out an outside influence, because here we're really good at training the trainer and being super inbred. But again, you don't know what you don't know until you start getting outside, taking off those blinders. I go to or teach at the majority of fire conferences around. You know what I mean? And through Fire Nuggets, I've got friends that teach it, almost every one of them. Dude, I can count on one hand how many Phoenix, Mesa, Chandler, Gilbert, and Glendale dudes. And I got to give a shout out to Glendale and Gilbert. I see more of you at conferences outside of Arizona, at Water on the Fire, H-Rock, Firemanship, all of those, than anybody else, right? It wasn't till recently in Noah and his dudes from Phoenix, that I saw anybody from there. And I never see guys, from Mesa unless there's part of my cadre or whatever. So we need to get outside the box more. Our organizations really need to step up. If you have tuition reimbursement, maybe the unions can be like, hey, some of this money should be used for conferences, not just school. But let's get these guys out to go to some of these major conferences and learn from the guys that have been here forever. The fire service is evolving, and it's evolving quickly. So to stay up on that, it's impossible for us to do it inbred. We have to go out and search for these answers. I'm doing a mid-rise class for the Copper State Fools coming up here. Again, I sat down with my buddy Clark Lamping and Jimmy Davis, and they blew my mind. I teach high rise at the Hot Operations Conference in Pensacola with these guys. And, mid rise is a whole different animal. And I had no idea. I was completely unaware. And that's your typical firefighter U, right? There's 3 U's in the fire service. You're unaware, unwilling, or unable, one or the other. Once we get to the bottom of which one that is, we can try to fix it, right? So I'm unaware. And so I'm like, oh man, I need to fix this. Time to go back to the drawing board and share this. You know what I mean? So, but yeah, that's me on my high horse.
Well, that's where I need to keep you right now. I'm trying to keep you on your high horse because we've been going for over an hour, so I would stay there because it's been so good. I love asking this question because people listen to the podcast across the country right now, so everybody does it different, and I know for a fact you guys do it different than we do. So tell the listeners, let's transition just to the fun stuff. Let's talk about a fire, right? So your bread and butter, 99.9% of the time, bread and butter, 2-story house fire. What is your guys' box assignment, running assignment, whatever it's called, in your system? What do you get? And then how are the assignments typically sent out? Is it a IC1, IC2? Is it predetermined running assignments? Just break down for the listeners how you guys run it in Mesa for just a normal house fire, working house fire.
It's pretty fluid, but our initial dispatch is 3 in 1. So 3 engines, 1 ladder, 1 BC. And then in Mesa, we'll do what we call a working fire. From what I understand, I don't think most people do that. We don't have, it used to be when we were big at like RIT, rapid intervention teams or rapid intervention crews, that 3rd in unit would always be RIT. Now it's not like that, right? We just use them as far as tactical objectives. But, it's when we do a working fire, we just get one more engine for extra stuff, rehab or whatever. And then we balance to a first alarm, and that's a whole nother 3 in 1 assignment. 3 engines, another ladder, another BC, stuff like that. So we have that 3 deep order model that we shoot for, right? We've got the work cycle, we've got a relief cycle, and then we've got the backup cycle. So we've got that 3 deep command presence. The battalion chiefs, dude, there's some confusion in the valley right now about what that forward BC is supposed to do. We had a structure collapse in June with 10 of our guys in a 4,000 square foot house. They all had to bail out different areas of the house, some out of a window, some made of it out of Arcadia door. The battalion chief was assigned to interior, unable to manage that, essentially a mayday, which never got called. Right? 10 people trapped, crews divided, people exiting out of both places. We just never got a really good grasp on accountability. But so that battalion chief, that 2nd battalion chief, I handle that a little bit differently than some. I usually try to keep accountability and outside that IDLH and manage resources. But, the 1st in engine goes in for search, rescue, or fire control. Right? Those are 3 very distinctly different things, but I hear it all the time. I'm going inside for search, rescue, fire control. No, you're not. You're going to do one or the other. But I don't care which one you do. Just get it done. Right? And give me that primary. So once they go into, I'll probably, they're either hand jack and a water supply, which I can get into the nuances of that. I don't like to do it if it's far because it elevates your heart rate that's already elevated. When you're hypoxic and you're doing stuff, your math isn't right. So I would like that 2nd or 3rd in unit to lay in that supply line. I don't care if that 1st unit runs out of water as long as they're not interior. But so there's a lot of that. Where am I going to prioritize my water supplies that are deprioritized water supplies? And then the 3rd in unit is either going to be evacuation or RIT, right? So it's whatever those tactical objectives are, again, to aggressively lower my risk management plan. If I can get it all evacuated in a primary all clear, I just went into the yellow with my risk management plan. Now I'm only protecting property, right? I can make better decisions.
Now, in your system, does that 1st in officer, do they take command? Do they pass it? How does that work? And then when the battalion chief does show up, how's that transition? Is it always, is it toward the officer? Just break down the listeners how you guys run it.
So there's not an always or never. Again, I'm a little different. There are battalion chiefs that will take it right away. I have taken it right away in some situations, but the first in company officer is going to assume command. I like that company officer to go mobile. There are some chiefs that like them to stay stationary. I disagree with that in a lot of these scenarios. I'm not going to say that there's an always, right? There is a time where that company officer may stay out and take a stationary command to set this up and not pass me a turd as IC2. We don't refer to it as IC2, right? We'll have, the initial command officer will be the engine company captain, and then I'll be BC battalion, and then I'll assume what would be IC2. We do that all different ways as well. Sometimes they pass it. Sometimes I'll assume it and give that, confirmation or assumption confirmation and position of command later on. So personally, I like my company officer to assign their first 3 units. Being an engine captain, there is nothing I hated more than getting out. Weren't always clean cab, but once we are pulling our hose line, getting it to the front door, and a BC comes on scene, I'm trying to tell my crews I'm doing a 360, this and that, and they'll go, Battalion 204 to command. And I'm literally looking at them in the BC ride going, you know as much as I do, so unless you're just going to take it, which, so like, give me a minute to work. Well, I personally, if it works out, I really like my first in engine officer or ladder officer to do the initial assumption, confirmation, and position of command. And once they do the initial size up, right, then they can assign their units as needed and then pass command to me. And that stemmed from another rescue and double fatality that I had as a young captain. Went in, my firefighter VES'd solo through a window. My other firefighter and I went into the front door. We found 2 dead people, a dad and a 3-year-old baby next to him. They tried to get out the wrong door. My firefighter made it to the back bedroom where there was 9 people inside. He opened the Arcadia door, let everybody out, but I had 2 severely burned patients with no recognizable features on the interior, right? So that kind of changed the way, like, the chief is calling me on the radio, calling me on the radio, calling me on the radio. And for me, I should have been like, Chief, stand by, right? Like, I hear you, but I know you're going to assign these next units this, and they can't do that. I need my third in engine now to be treatment because I got 9 people coming out the back with smoke inhalation. I've got a missing baby that they're telling me is in here, firefighter to the VES that room. And I got 2 dead patients here that I'll probably leave in place because of their extent of their injuries, right? So stop calling me on the radio. Let me make those initial assignments and pass command to you. I have more information than you. Let me do my job. So I've taken that with me to where I really try to let my first in company officers, and I empower them to make those decisions, right? That's what I want them to do. And then pass me the scene with a full picture. How can I support you now? Right? So I like to do that. Again, there are chiefs that get on scene and just want to take it. So if I can empower my captains to do that and make those decisions, they're going to pass me a better plate of how I can support them during the rest of this incident, right? What other resources do you need? How can I support you? Where do those resources need to be allocated? If I just take it, I lose a couple things. I lose the information they have, and I'd lose the trust, because trust has to work both ways between your operational crews and your ICs, right? And if I don't empower them to make decisions, they're not going to help me on the fire ground. So again, I give them the intent, let them try to manage this. And then we talk about pros and cons later. Hey, what was your plan up there? Like, why did you think you needed to vertically ventilate over a commercial public storage? Did you know you were over the fire, or did you really know that you were 6, cubicle storage units back and you did absolutely no good, right? You just wasted our time and a resource. So, we'll talk about those decisions later. Again, it's okay. we'll get through it, but that's how we're going to get better, is empower our captains. I don't believe in always taking a stationary command. I think that's silly, because we're a young fire department. There's a chance that I have a firefighter with 6 months in the back seat with a firefighter with a year ish on. There is no scenario that those two are going interior by themselves. None. Unless that trust level, and we're training all the time, so we have those expectations lined out. They're using their heads up display tactically inside that fire, where they're going, hey, I got one green, copy that. I got one amber, copy that. Interior to command. I need an on-deck crew to come relieve us. We're at one amber. Now I can transfer that sector effectively. Are they using all that information, including knowing their weapons, where we're doing it, the surface cooling versus gas cooling, isolating those points of refuge for you and the civilians, and using their mask and air management? If you're not doing that efficiently, then there is no scenario that I am letting you in there by yourself. Those are my expectations of my senior firefighters.
So with that said, what do you say to the guys that, as battalions, that will take it immediately when they get on scene? Because their reasoning behind it would be, how can you effectively run command while you're interior attempting to work? Because let's say that scenario, two very junior members, and it's that short leash day. It's not long leash. It's short leash. You're on my freaking hip pretty much this entire call. So how do you feel about that situation where those battalions are like, hey, bro, I'm going to take it every time, not because I don't trust you, because I'm trying to empower you to go to work with your crew. What do you think?
And that's fine too, right? So it's not a hard and fast rule. Like I said at the beginning, there are times where I've taken it to where, and most of my captains know, like, hey, I'm probably not going to do that. Take it from you. However, if you need me to do it because of that scenario, pass it. So I don't want to take it. I have before, because an on-scene report got cut off. I didn't get the information. I can see they're busy. You know what I mean? Then I can do that with part of the scene size up. So again, there's no hard and fast rule. You're reading the situation. If we can allow them to do it with forward info, that's why we put a BC forward, so they can see and give us information back. Well, those captains have that same opportunity, but we need to invest time in them and tell them what we want. So there are absolutely times where I'll tell my guys, I'm like, hey, sometimes I might take it. I don't want to, but if you want me to have it, absolutely pass it, right? So there's three scenarios there that I'm giving my guys. Again, think about what you have. If it's overwhelming, or you're behind the eight ball, or you got units stacking up and you don't know which units to deploy, pass it. I got you. If you want to hold it, assign yours. You know what I mean? No. There's a couple things that, I think we got into, like, we're sharing all this stuff. I hate the chiefs that tell me it's not in volume 2. It is in volume 2. Whatever it is, it is. The volume 2 gives us the autonomy to do our job. That is the way it's written, right?
Explain to listeners real quick what volume 2 is for the ones that don't know.
Oh, so we are blessed in the Valley. We regionally, I think the city of Mesa has its own dispatch center. We're about 139 square miles. We dispatch for, just in Mesa, we have, 54 units or something like that, 20 something stations. So, but we dispatch for multiple agencies, in the East Valley. Phoenix Fire has their own dispatch center. Our dispatch center in Mesa and Phoenix's communicate almost seamlessly. So we dispatch 26 jurisdictions combined, probably over 1,000 units. And there's no city boundaries. So the other reason why we're blessed in our system, which is the gold standard, it's the linchpin of the response model. We work off one set of SOPs called Phoenix Regional Volume 2. And when I go into some of those, VES is not in volume 2. We don't do it. It's not in volume 2. Okay. Can you please open that and show me where standard search is? Can you please open that and tell me where oriented search is, or team search, or split search? Can you please show me where those are in volume 2? Because they're not there either, bro. How am I supposed to search this? Or is it written to say, hey, just search it and you can use the technique that you're trained on and the most efficient at, right? So it doesn't tell me when to pull a 2.5. It doesn't tell me a fire flow formula in volume 2, when to select those weapons. Cut your shit with it's not in volume 2. It is in volume 2. It allows me, it's a departmental expectation of how an emergency scene should be operated on, and it allows me the autonomy to do most things. There is not very many times in these SOPs that they say shall. The one that is notable says, the one I quoted earlier, the incident commander shall direct a primary search into all involved and exposed occupancies that can be entered within that risk management plan. And again, risk is managed by competence, and that's managed by training, right? So if you're not willing to train, step aside before you get somebody hurt. Right. And that's the bottom line. And, I think the other quote is, there's several that I love. Let no man's ghost return to say his training let him down. Train with a sense of urgency so you don't perform in a sense of panic. All of those little things that I'm like, oh, let's take that with me. The best one, though, sits over, I think it's Denver. Says the rules are never more important than the mission. The rules are never more important than the mission. Get it done, save the life, make the grab, put the fire out.
Yeah. So if you're telling me that if it's not in volume 2, you can't do it, then in that case, you have a commercial structure and you have a victim that's 167 feet away. You can't get them because you're only allowed to enter the structure 150 foot.
Right.
It's like I point stuff like that out to people all the time. It's like, no, you are empowered to make the correct decision and the correct call to save property and life, period, the end, right? You're here to do the right thing. We're here for the public. That's it, right? And like you said before, we have a guideline that's supposed to be able to help us or educate us to make those proper decisions, but it always falls on the suppression officer, my personal opinion.
For sure. And there's the rule of threes. Everything is, right? There's 3 flow formulas that we discussed earlier. There's 3 handline stretches, right? You're stretching from a rig, appliance, or like standpipe type of thing, right? Off a system. You consider 3 things as far as equipment, operations, and deployment, right? So, your flow formulas. And really, if we go into all the scenarios, and you'll hear me talk about this when we talk about mid-rise stuff, you just use the acronym PACE. Are you familiar with that?
I'm not. No, sir.
You look at that and go, it's a primary plan, an alternative plan, and then a contingency plan and an emergency plan. I tell my captains, I said, you're responsible for the first 2. You give me the primary and alternative. Think about those water supply options. Think about the attack line options. Think about your search and rescue approach options, right? I'll come up with a contingency and an emergency plan. I'm going to come up with where I'm going to do an additional standpipe, where I'm going to do flying standpipes for these other things, because the hallways are 400 feet long with standpipes on the fire floor. Right? We've mid-rises in some of these hallways, we have to hook up to the fire floor, not the floor below, because of the NFPA standard and the International Building Code. So, we don't get into little nuances like that. We don't even get into guys that know how to adjust or even identify pressure restricting versus pressure reducing valves or devices. Dude, the way we embrace mediocrity is crazy, and we just don't know what we don't know.
I love it. So, well, we've talked for a long time, right? We've covered a lot of different topics.
People are done hearing me talk again. See, they're like, I'm done hearing Slayer talk.
I love it because you're going on a podcast journey right now. You're like you're hitting them all. So before we go to the questions for season 2, besides thanking you so much for your time and all the knowledge that you're spending out there, I mean, guys are going to love this episode. Is there anything that you want to make sure that you get across today before we start wrapping it up?
You just train. Go out and train. Seek something outside the valley. Get away from our inbred mindset. And then when you do that, please don't do what I did, right? Because no one cares how smart you are if you're an asshole. So, and that's me, right? So I started to be like, I'm going to shove this down your throat, and we need to know it. We need to make this change. We need to change. Like, why does our 2.5-inch line have a gated Y on it? That's the stupidest thing I ever seen in my life. Like, all of my nozzles are flow 150. So, I put a nozzle on my 2.5 and my chief was like, dude, you can't do that. And I go, why not? It's my rig, right? He's like, well, no one knows what you're doing. I don't give a shit. Catch him up. I had somebody tell me, your IC is worried about what you're doing on the fire ground. So I'm going to do my job. You just tell me what you want strategy wise, And the other thing was, I can't even remember what they were saying. Chris, I'm going to have to ask you, this is a quote. I'm going to have to ask you to stop training with your crew because you're getting too advanced and the department needs to catch up. Right. So anyways, I put this nozzle on my truck. I'll finish the story and then I'll get back into it. So I asked him, I said, hey, Chief, I said, let's go out and figure this out, right? The gated Y is stupid. So I know we're getting back into this horizontal standpipe thing, but we can't use it regionally because Glendale uses a 50 psi nozzle. Phoenix uses to a 75 to 100. We're already 25 psi at the tip off. Not to mention, they use a 1.88 hose or 1.91 hose. Your friction loss is already off, right? Your firefighters are going to compensate that with the nozzle. It's dumb. Do an extended lay. It's safer. I'm not saying get rid of it altogether. Again, I'm not saying get rid of it altogether. But your primary attack line should be uninterrupted and uncompromised. Period. Uninterrupted and uncompromised attack line. So I asked my chief, I'm like, hey, you pull your gated Y, and I'm going to pull my 2.5. We've got a second-story apartment fire. Your kids are trapped up there, Chief. We get to our destination at the same time. We get water to your gated Y and my 2.5 at the exact same time. I'm going to clamp, pin, Camella, whatever I choose. I'm going to open my nozzle and I'm going to start knocking this down at 60 psi at the tip. It's going to give me 326 GPM. That's 5.5 gallons a second. How long do you think it's going to take you, Chief, to either extend that 100 feet of 1.75 inch attack package if it's connected, or do you got to make that connection? How long is it going to take you to do that realistically? 30 seconds? You're the best damn chief I ever seen. I'm going to say 30 seconds, right? 30 seconds. In that 30 seconds at 5.5 gallons a second, I have delivered 150 gallons of water to that fire. You have not even opened your nozzle, and it's going to take you another minute to catch me. Who's more effective on the fire ground, and who do you want there first, Chief, if your kids are trapped on the balcony? This was a real conversation. And he went, leave the nozzle, but we got to go through the committee. So now we have this freaking nozzle on our truck, right? But I'm like, dude, organizationally, we are failing each other to not give us the right weapon selection. And then we don't even teach it, right? I had a firefighter tell me the other day, I'm like, hey, how much does this flow? 100 gallons? Try again. 500? No, it doesn't. So let's talk about this, right? So, but yeah, so there's a lot. Just the fundamentals of being a good firefighter. Understanding those little things can make you more effective on the fire ground to where people go, man, they're aggressive. No, they just know their job, right? Get out and do it.
I love it. So, Chief saying train, get out, do it, right? Know the basics in and out. Pretty much what I'm catching from that.
Yep.
Okay, good. All right, brother. Well, listen, let's get into the questions for the season, right? So we always ask a why. We ask a why when it comes down to hiring a brand new employee. We ask a why when we're trying to promote through the fire service or even take another job. But this is your why. So why did Chris Slayer become a fireman? Did you get bit by the bug, something as a little kid? What brought you down this path back before 1999?
Dude, you're not going to like this answer. So I wanted to be a cop,
Okay.
right? So I started to volunteer with the Central Arizona Mountain Rescue Association,
Okay.
which is a branch off Maricopa County Sheriff's, right? So when I started doing that, I was a pretty avid rock climber, pretty avid mountaineer, did high altitude mountaineering. And so some of the guys I volunteered with were guys that were on Phoenix and Peoria Fire. So blame them. They went, dude, we get paid for this in TRT. And I'm like, you guys do this like legit? Like, okay, I think I want to be a fireman, right? And then plus, back then it was a little different now, right? There's like 3,000, people for 30 spots. I'm like, bro, chicks dig it. And I'm going to get more ass than a toilet seat. Done, right? Done. So that's why I wanted to be a fireman right, at first, right? And then I finally realized I had craniorectal inversion, right? My head was so far up my ass, and said, man, I better be good at my job, right? So I always tried to do really good at TRT and hazmat stuff. And then I started becoming, the interior nozzle, what can we do for Mrs. Smith that's better than what we currently do firefighter? So that's why I wanted to be a fireman.
I love it. So that's amazing. That's the best answer to date on guarantee on why. It's supposed to when you get to the chicks take this, right?
Yeah. Now
Great.
I'm old, so I could say that stuff. I'm in shape, but it's around, right?
Yeah, hey, yeah, everything's a shake. No, you're a stud. Everyone knows that. All right, so we know the why. So we talked a little bit about traditions. Where it's one of my favorite topics. So, what is your favorite fire department tradition? But more importantly, why? Why is it your favorite?
That dude. So when you asked me that, I was like, there's a lot of great traditions, right? We have a lot of great traditions in the fire service. But I got to tell you, and I think we overlooked this one, is eating together at the kitchen table. If I'm going to get a tattoo of the fire service, it's probably not going to be a Maltese cross. It's not going to be my badge. It's not going to be some awesome dragon. Dude, we should all get a kitchen table
I'm down.
because that's where the love and the magic of the fire service happens, right? When you can cook a meal together and laugh about how good or shitty it is and talk about the calls and decompress and take those opportunities to get to know each other on that level, dude, that's one thing I didn't want to lose when I was a chief, right? I always want to be invited back to the kitchen table. The kitchen table is by far the best tradition. Cooking together is the best tradition the fire service has in the United States.
I love it. It's funny because a lot of people will give that answer, but every answer is different, if that makes any sense. Their why is different. It's a kitchen table or it's a firehouse kitchen, but the why is different, which is what I love it so much. And just proves over and over and over again, it is so important. I mean, any fire department, anything, documentary, movie, whatever the case might be, their boys are always at the table. And it's for a reason, because again, it is church, right? It is family. It is therapy, it is everything. So
It embodies the fire service. And when I retire, a lot of people ask me what I'm going to miss. And I tell them, I said, I'm going to miss the kitchen table. I'm going to miss the clowns, not the circus. Right. So that's what I'm going to miss.
I love it. All right. Well, Chief, great answer. So this is a new question for the season, and we're asking it for a valid reason. So across the United States right now, 50% of all fire departments are 5 years and less right now. It's the latest or stat out there. So if you had a chance to tell a guy with 5 years on or less, one thing only, what would it be to help him get through his 25 to 30-year career?
It's not negotiable.
Okay.
Find something to embrace. It doesn't have to be everything, right? For me, like I said, my job was to bring guys home at the end of their 25-year career, and I'm in a position with the network that I've had to bring a lot of information back. It's not that I'm passionate about all that stuff, but if I can make a better firefighter, and dude, I get text all the time. Hey man, I know you taught me about gas cooling, and we did this. Well, I was in a hoarder house and I used that technique and I saved a life. Hey man, I did this, and this was a direct result of your class. And I didn't learn it here. I didn't learn it in my 27 years in the city of Mesa. I could live the first year over again, right? Because we're inbred. The first year for 26 years is all I would ever know. Got to get out, seek information, seek the guys that are passionate about it, and I think I'm going to butcher this quote by Mahatma Gandhi, but it's something like, live as if you're going to die tomorrow and learn as if you're going to live forever. So always train and be better through your career. Don't sit stagnant.
I love it. And that's a great single word answer that resonates, so deep. So train. That's it, right? Train, because that's going to benefit you, the civilians, your department for the rest of your career. Last question. If you could snap your fingers, is one of my favorites. No sweat equity, instant gratification for the ADHDers like myself, and it would change something in the American Fire Service. Doesn't even have to do with your city. Change one thing in the American Fire Service. What would it be? But more importantly, why are you changing this?
So I thought about this one for a little while, man, and it really stems from me not knowing. When I started getting out, and going to firemanship in Portland, and everybody's preaching, them. They don't have the same response model as we do. It's mutual aid, not automatic aid. They're requesting assistance. They stop at city boundaries. They have different SOPs, and it's ego, ego, ego. We can't do this because our taxpayers do this. They don't have the same service model as we do here and Bruno's vision back in the day. So I guess if I could snap my fingers and change the American Fire Service, it would be the same or very similar response plan as we have here. No city boundaries. We all talk the same language. Cities and that respective state and their organizations work off similar SOPs, so we can do what's right for the civilians that we took an oath to protect collectively in the American Fire Service. We can't do that unless you're responding like we do in the Phoenix system. There's always a shortcoming in the service delivery model if that doesn't happen. So if I could snap my fingers today and change it, there are several, but I would do what's best for Mrs. Smith. And that would be everybody works off no city boundaries, automatic aid response plans, and similar or the same SOPs.
I love it. It's funny because the system that I cut my teeth in back east is completely different. It's mutual aid, exactly what you explained. And I could count on probably two hands on a couple house fires I watched burn across the city border, because that's just, they were not going to request help. And that's just how it was back in the day. But with that said, so why don't you think that isn't a thing? Because how successful it is out here. The public, Mrs. Smith, or Grandma Schmerkins, I always refer to her as, when they call 911, how it works here in this region is how everyone across the country believes it actually works. But as firemen, we all know, and the guys listening know, that's not the truth. So I'm just curious, just personally, why does Chris Slayer think that doesn't happen?
Man, again, it goes back to our city does it better. I don't want to do it like that. Ego's in the way. Budget. You've got to it's a bigger deal than just agreeing on it at the street level. Your resources have to be the same or similar. I know we had a big deal back in the day where all of Mesa's engine are 4-person, always 2 ALS, including our ladder companies. But Tempe was not. So at 2 a.m, in ladder 4 would get a call from ladder 273 and go, here's our patient, because we don't have a medic. So now I'm taking a resource, and a ladder truck at that, not something I have a lot of. So I'm taking a resource out of my city that my taxpayers have agreed to purchase for our protection to go into your city and transport a patient that you're not capable of because of one thing or another. Right. So there are those growing pains that we need to wrap our head around. And the guys in the street, it's above us, right? We just need to run the play. Like, I could call you a jerk all day because of this and get mad at you, but it's not your choice. Just like my guys did this thing the other day, they crushed it. And some of the comments online were clean clap slows you down. I don't disagree with you. I'm not sure I buy into clean cab altogether, because there was no data to support it. Phoenix has had their packs out for 30 years. Their cancer level seems to be, and I'm not data informed, but it seems to be no different than the rest of ours collectively around the state. So is it the packs that are actually a problem? I don't know. I'm unaware. Right. But we need to do some more stuff to do what's right for Mrs. Smith. So all of these little things, I think that people are unwilling to overcome to make these big, gigantic changes to do what we know is right.
Listen, Chief, thank you, first of all, for sitting down with us. A pre-thank you, because by the time this airs, you're already going to be at the meeting. You're going to have a killer class. I can't wait to attend. A lot of guys are super stoked about it. The buzz on the street. So everyone's been asking, hey, when's the meeting? April 22nd. This will be well past that. I really want to thank you for your time. I know you're a busy man. You're doing your, you have, what, 8 months left now? 9 months left?
Nine months. I'm shooting for. So, like I said, I got hired on January 11th, 1999, which was my 25th birthday. I started the academy. I'm shooting for my last shift to be January 11th, 2026. So I'll be leaving on my 53rd birthday, 27 years later.
Amazing. Then, any plans for retirement?
So I'm kind of hoping to get a job with MES, Municipal Emergency Services. So the whole part of that is because I think we're specing our apparatus poorly. If I, there's a lot of things that we could do better. We're letting the pendulum swing too far when we're putting are the zippers on our coat slowing us down? We've got clean cab, so we can't mask up, or we might be fogged up depending on time of the year. It's slowing us down. Do we need to pull a step out to get our hoses off? Slowing us down, right? How are our hose loads done? Do we have the right nozzles with our hoses? What type of equipment? So I'm just transferring my passion for the job, what I know of our shortcomings are, into an area where I can hopefully help people overcome those hurdles and the shortcomings that we know in the fire service exist. So work within a city's budget constraints, figure out what's best for them to do as far as SCBA turnout coats. Where is it slowing us down in our response model? What's going to help us out on the fire ground as far as necessary pressures and unnecessary pressures? What's going to expedite the process with extended lays and stuff like that? How can I help from the fundamental level of specing engines, apparatus, and equipment now to make our firefighters' job easier? So I'm going to try to make that transition. So hopefully MES or Sure Sales will hire me. We'll see.
Well, they would be idiots if they don't. So that's great news. So you're going to still make positive effects for the firemen, at least in this region, which is amazing. So appreciate that. Appreciate your time, Chief. And we're getting ready to sign off here, but thank you for your time. Congrats on a freaking amazing career. And again, you're a stud in the Valley. You're a stud across the country. So thank you for taking time to sit down with us. And then more importantly, thank you ahead of time for being able to go to our meeting and be able to pass on that additional knowledge to the go-getters, the hard chargers that come out. Way to keep the brotherhood alive. Thank you so much. So we appreciate you.
My pleasure, man. And yeah, you're gonna make me blush on too. I don't think of it like that again, but like I said, I try to do what's right for the guys that I care about. But I look forward to the mid-rise class. It's gonna be super cool. Like I said, I didn't know what I didn't know, so there'll be a lot of information. I'll probably talk your ear off there too, but I'm gonna try to keep it to an hour and a half. But there's some stuff our guys got to know to be safe. So, all right, man. I'll see you there. See you, buddy.
Thank you for listening. Remember, this podcast is for informational use only. All the information, opinions are of the guest and the host of the show and are not affiliated or endorsed by the fire departments, organizations, or companies they work for or with. We are here to spread the knowledge, make each other better, and keep the love and traditions of the American Fire Service alive.
Thanks for listening. We'll be back in another 2 weeks. Remember to like, share, review if you can. Helps drive traffic to our podcast. Remember, let's leave our ego out of the fire service. It's amazing what we can accomplish when no one's looking for credit. Much love. Let's stop beating our own and become better firemen. Catch you next time.